The film begins where a Japanese police commander named Saito Hajime and his troops are carrying out an arrest operation against government rebel groups. During the operation, that night, several members of the police force were suddenly slaughtered by the samurai named Sojiro Seta from the rebel group. When Saito tries to investigate the attack further, he meets Makoto Shishio, who leads a rebel group. Makoto support the Shogun party therefore, he offered Saito to join his group, considering that the police commander also supported the Shogun's party in the past. However, Saito refused the invitation. Hearing his refusal, Makoto ordered his men to attack Saito before they finally left the place. The scene switches to Kaoru's Kamiya dojo, which now has many students. Many of these students wanted to learn sword techniques from Kenshin. Unfortunately, he refused to teach them and asked them to focus more on the sword techniques taught by Kaoru. That day, several police officers came to see him and asked him to meet the interior minister named Okubo. Soon after, Kenshin and Sanosuke went to the ministry office to meet Okubo. When they arrived at Okubo's office, he told Kenshin that he wanted to ask Kenshin to help defeat the rebel group led by Makoto Shishio. Okubo explains that in the past, Makoto Shishio was a batosai who worked for the shogun government and had a cruel and unforgiving nature. Just like Kenshin, Makoto has extraordinary sword arts abilities and can defeat many opponents at once. But he is known as a brutal batosai who has the heart to kill anyone around him. Therefore, after the war ended, the government decided to kill him and ruthlessly burn him alive. Unexpectedly, when Makoto was burned, snow suddenly fell and extinguished the fire in his body. As a result, he managed to survive even though his body suffered severe burns. And from that moment on, he was determined to take revenge against the government. Therefore, Okubo asks Kenshin's help to stop Makoto before they all create great chaos and destroy a new era of peace. Okubo knew that Kenshin had sworn not to kill anyone, so he gave Kenshin time to consider the offer. After Kenshin and Sanosuke returned to Kamiya's dojo, Kenshin told about the task given by Okubo to Kaoru. Hearing this, Kaoru doesn't want Kenshin to accept the assignment because she is afraid that Kenshin will turn into a batosai again. 1 week later, Okubo was traveling to the ministry office using his horse-drawn carriage. He was suddenly attacked and killed by Sojiro Seta as part of Makoto's plan to overthrow the current government. Okubo's death reached the ministry office. While bringing Kenshin in front of dozens of police officers brutally killed by Makoto's troops, they explained that Makoto was getting out of control. Saito, who happened to be there, advised Kenshin to go to Kyoto and look for Makoto's troops. After he returned to the dojo, Kenshin, who had decided to accept Okubo's assignment, told Kaoru that he was going to Kyoto. Hearing his decision, Kaoru could only remain silent. However, Kenshin realized that this task was too dangerous and that he could be killed in this mission. So he said goodbye to Kaoru and thanked her for everything she had done for him. When Kaoru arrives at Kamiya's dojo, she tells everyone that Kenshin has decided to go to Kyoto. Sanosuke was very upset because Kenshin went alone and did not let him help with the mission. Sanosuke walked out of the dojo to vent his anger. At that time, he met a samurai named Aoshi Shinomori, who asked about Kenshin's whereabouts because he holds a strong grudge against him. Sanosuke chased the man away and said that there was no batosai in that place. However, he attacked Sanosuke to tell him about Kenshin's whereabouts. Sanosuke almost died from the samurai's attack, but suddenly Megumi stopped the samurai so that Sanosuke could survive. That night when Kenshin was fetching drinking water in the river, a girl named Misao suddenly appeared and stole his sword. Fortunately, he managed to catch her in a village and reclaim his sword from her hand. She still wanted to take his sword. A boy suddenly approached them and asked for help to save his older brother, who was seriously injured. The next day, Kenshin and Misao went to the village where the boy lived. When the boy found that his parents had been brutally murdered and hanged from a tree, he could only cry while calling for his parents. Not long after, Makoto's men returned to the village and intended to kill Kenshin, who was alone then. As a result, he had no choice but to fight against all of Makoto's troops in the forge to protect the surviving villagers. After a long fight, Kenshin defeated all of Makoto's troop members without injury. Shortly after the fight ended, Sojiro approached Kenshin and asked him to follow him to meet Makoto. Upon Kenshin's arrival at Makoto's place, Kenshin asks Makoto to fight, but he refuses after he sees Kenshin's sword, whose sharp side is reversed. Then, Makoto orders Sojiro to represent him to fight against Kenshin, so he can find out how great Kenshin's current abilities are. A brief battle between Kenshin and Sojiro begins where both look superior and have very fast movements. But unexpectedly, after a very intense and epic fight, Sojiro managed to win the fight and managed to break Kenshin's sword. From that fight, Kenshin realized that Makoto's strength and abilities were still superior to his own. After the fight, Kenshin returns to the village to meet Misao and the boy he had previously helped. But when Kenshin arrived there, he found that the villagers who were still alive were beating up Makoto's men, whom he had previously defeated. They even provoked the boy who previously asked Kenshin for help to kill Makoto's troops as revenge for the death of his parents. When the boy is about to kill a member of Makoto's army, Kenshin stops him and advises him not to become a killer. Meanwhile, at Makoto's headquarters in Kyoto, Makoto's man named Hoji has finished preparing the equipment and weapons they will use in the big battle later. Makoto also orders Sojiro to prepare a trained samurai troop called the Troop of 10 Swords. On the other hand, Sanosuke, who is still not fully recovered from his wounds from his fight with a samurai, intends to go after Kenshin to Kyoto. Megumi gives him some medicines that he and Kenshin can use later, but instead, he gave the drug prescription to Kaoru and said that the person who had to heal Kenshin's wound was Kaoru. After a long journey, Kenshin finally arrived in Kyoto and accidentally met Misao again. Then she invited him to stay at an inn managed by her relative, Okina. Okina was a former member of the samurai in the reconnaissance squad during the Shogun era, known as the Oniwabanshu. Okina then tells Kenshin about the former chief of the Oniwabanshu squad named Aoshi, who grudge against him. In the past, after the Shogun government was overthrown and replaced with a new imperial government, all members of the reconnaissance squad were executed by the government. Aoshi thinks that what happened to his troops was caused by Kenshin, because Kenshin has created a new era in the country. Kenshin informed that his main purpose in coming to Kyoto was to stop Makoto's movement. Then he asks Okina for help to find the whereabouts of a man named Arai Shaku, who once gave him a reverse-edged sword. At night at Makoto's headquarters, one of Makoto's men named Cho, who has been spying on Kenshin, secretly reports that Kenshin is currently planning to look for a new sword from Arai Shaku. The next day, Kenshin received information about Arai's whereabouts, but it turned out that Arai had died several years ago. While visiting his grave, Kenshin recalled the memories of the past, when Arai gave him an inverted sword so that he could protect others without having to kill the enemies. After that, Kenshin went to Arai Shaku's house to meet Arai's son, Arai Seiku, and asked for help. So he made a new sword for Kenshin, but unfortunately, Seiku has not yet to forge swords for a long time because he is worried that the swords he makes will be used to commit crimes. After hearing Seiku's explanation, Kenshin respected his decision and left the place. Shortly after Kenshin left, Cho suddenly appeared and threatened Seiku to hand over the last sword forged by Arai Shaku. But because he refused, Chao took his baby and took him away from the place. Because of that, Seiku and his wife ran after Kenshin and asked him to help save their baby, who had been held hostage by Chao. Kenshin rushed to a temple where Cho was holding Seiku's child hostage and asked him to hand over the baby. But Cho didn't listen to his request and preferred to attack him, so the fight between them could no longer be avoided. On the other hand, Kaoru and Yahiko, who had arrived in Kyoto, received news about a fight between two samurai in a temple. They rushed to the shrine because they were sure that one of the samurai was Kenshin. Back to the fight between Kenshin and Cho, Kenshin was forced to fight using the scabbard because his sword had been broken in the previous fight. Seiko, who realizes that Kenshin does not have a sword, decides to take the last sword left by his father so that Kenshin can win the fight. After picking up the sword in the warehouse, Seiko threw the sword at Kenshin in the middle of the fight. After knowing that Kenshin already has a new sword, Cho tries to provoke him so that he can return to being a Batusai by killing Seiko's son. Fortunately, before Cho could injure Seiko's child, Kenshin stopped him and slashed his neck. Kaoru, who saw the incident, panicked and tried to call Kenshin's name so he would not return to being a murderer. But after Yahiko took a closer look, it turned out that Kenshin's new sword was a sword with a sharp, upside-down edge, so he still hadn't killed Cho. After the fight, Seiko could get his baby back while Chu was detained by the Japanese police. They want to ask him about Makoto's plan. Based on the information provided by Chao, Makoto plans to create a big mess by burning Kyoto the next night. Upon hearing that, Saito ordered Kenshin and the police squad to prepare themselves for the fight against Makoto's troops. That afternoon, the police began evacuating all residents and asked them to move to a safer location. While at the inn, Kaoru and Yahiko asked Kenshin for permission to help in the battle tonight. At first, Kenshin rejected because the battle would be very dangerous, but Kaoru continued to insist, so he had no choice but to allow them to join. In the evening, the battle between the Japanese government forces against Makoto's troops finally began. Soon after, Makoto's troops came with a giant fire torch to burn the houses and buildings belonging to the residents. When they arrived in front of the city, the police forces opened fire on them, and the big fight finally began. Meanwhile, Kenshin and Saito have prepared to defeat the enemy with their swordsmanship skills. On the other hand, Kaoru and Yahiko are trying to prevent Makoto's troops from burning down the residents' houses. At the same time, Sanosuke begins to fight against the enemies. Meanwhile, Aoshi was at the inn, who was looking for Kenshin's whereabouts to take revenge. Okina tried to remind Aoshi, so a fierce battle between them could not be avoided anymore. Misao, who was on the battlefield, received news that Aoshi, her old partner, had come to Okina's inn. Then she rushed to the inn to meet Aoshi, who she had not seen for a long time. But when she arrived at the place, Misao was shocked that Aoshi had beaten Okina so viciously. In the middle of the fight, Kenshin finally found Makoto on the battlefield, so he ran after Makoto. But apparently, it was just a trap made by Makoto to trick him. Because of that, Kenshin was forced to face dozens of Makoto's men who had surrounded him in that place alone. Fortunately, with a little help from Sanosuke, Kenshin managed to defeat the enemy, and the Japanese government forces won the big battle. After the fight ended, Kenshin felt something was wrong because they could easily win the fight. He remembered that Makoto had two main goals in the attack he was carrying out: overthrowing the government and destroying Kyoto. Not long after, Kenshin realized that Makoto had kidnapped Kaoru, so he rushed to chase Makoto. After going through a long journey, Kenshin finally arrived at a port where Makoto's battleship was docked. He jumped into the ship to defeat Makoto's men and save Kaoru. Makoto's goal in kidnapping Kaoru is to awaken the killer's soul from within Kenshin. Feeling that he had been tricked, Kenshin attacked him and the Ten Swords army alone. In the middle of the fight, Kenshin saw Makoto's men, who dropped Kaoru into the ocean, so he stopped the fight and plunged into the sea to save her. Sadly, Kenshin failed to find Kaoru anywhere, and was dragged by the waves until he was stranded on a beach. Suddenly, a mysterious man approached and saved him.